The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across the marble floor of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant. Olivia Sterling, her platinum blonde hair perfectly styled, sat at the head table surrounded by executives worth billions. Then the door exploded open. 3 masked men burst in, guns raised, screaming commands that shattered the elegant atmosphere like broken glass. Chaos erupted instantly, but in the corner, a weathered man in a simple flannel shirt pulled his young daughter behind him, his eyes completely calm, watching everything with the stillness of a predator studying prey. Michael Harris had never intended to be at Le Bernardin that evening. The 36-year-old mechanic had saved for 3 months to bring his daughter Sophia here for her 7th birthday. His calloused hands looked out of place against the pristine white tablecloth, his sun-weathered face a stark contrast to the polished crowd around him. But Sophia had begged to eat where the rich people ate. Just once. To feel like a princess. So Michael had worn his only decent shirt, the blue flannel his late wife Sarah had bought him 5 years ago, and brought his little girl to this world that wasn't theirs. Across the room, Olivia Sterling commanded attention without trying. At 34, she'd built a tech empire worth $3 billion. Her ice-blue eyes could freeze a boardroom. Her sharp mind could dissect a business plan in seconds. She wore a black Chanel dress that cost more than most people's cars. Diamond earrings that caught the light with every movement. She believed in power, in control, in the simple truth that money solved everything. Weakness disgusted her. The poor were poor because they lacked ambition. That was the natural order. She was discussing a hostile takeover with her CFO when she first noticed the man in flannel. He seemed so utterly out of place, like a wolf who'd wandered into a palace. His daughter wore a simple yellow dress from Target, her brown curls tied with a ribbon that had seen better days. They were sharing a single appetizer, the girl's eyes wide with wonder at the fancy presentation. Olivia had almost laughed at the sight. How quaint, she'd thought. How terribly ordinary. She'd turned back to her conversation, dismissing them from her mind. But fate had other plans. The universe was about to teach Olivia Sterling that true strength had nothing to do with bank accounts. That real power came from places money could never reach, and the teacher would be a single father who'd seen hell and learned to walk through it without flinching. The first gunshot shattered the evening like thunder. The bullet punched through the ceiling, sending plaster raining down on screaming diners. The 3 men moved with practiced precision, one covering the door, another sweeping toward the kitchen, the third advancing on the main dining room. They wore black ski masks, military-style boots, moved like they'd done this before. The leader, a mountain of a man with prison tattoos visible on his neck, grabbed a waiter by the throat and threw him against the wall. Tables overturned as people scrambled for cover. A woman's designer heel snapped as she tried to run. The air filled with the sharp smell of fear and spilled wine. Olivia's bodyguard reached for his weapon, but froze when a gun pressed against his temple. The robbers weren't here for wallets and watches. They wanted the real prize, the high-value targets who could make them rich with a single wire transfer. The leader's eyes swept the room and locked onto Olivia. Everyone knew who she was. Her face had been on magazine covers, her billion-dollar deals splashed across financial newspapers. In the corner, Michael hadn't moved. While others dove under tables or pressed themselves against walls, he'd simply shifted his chair, positioning his body between the gunman and Sophia. His breathing remained steady, his pulse controlled. 7 years as a Navy SEAL had taught him that panic was death. His daughter pressed against his back, her small hands gripping his shirt. He could feel her trembling, heard her whispered whimper. But he didn't comfort her, didn't turn around. Any movement might draw attention. Better to be invisible, forgotten, overlooked. The leader started barking orders, demanding phones, wallets, jewelry. His partners moved through the room like sharks, stuffing valuables into duffel bags. But Michael could see it in their movements, the nervousness beneath the aggression. These weren't professionals. They were desperate men making desperate choices. That made them more dangerous. Desperate men did stupid things. One of the robbers, younger than the others, maybe 25, reached Olivia's table. His hand shook slightly as he pointed his weapon at her CFO. The man immediately surrendered his Rolex, his wallet, his phone. But the robber wanted more. He grabbed Olivia's wrist, his fingers digging into her skin. Her bodyguard tensed, but couldn't move, with a gun still pressed to his head. For the first time in her adult life, Olivia Sterling felt completely powerless. The sensation was foreign, terrifying. She'd built walls of money and influence. But here, now, none of it mattered. The young robber yanked Olivia to her feet, her designer heels scraping against the marble. He pressed the gun against her ribs, using her as a human shield as he backed toward the leader. The metal was cold through the thin fabric of her dress. She could smell his sweat, sour with adrenaline and fear. The leader smiled when he saw her, gold teeth glinting in the chandelier light. He knew exactly who she was, what she was worth. This wasn't random. They'd been watching, waiting for the right moment. Olivia Sterling, the untouchable CEO, was about to become a bargaining chip. Her legs trembled, but she forced herself to stand straight. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her afraid. The leader approached, his heavy boots echoing in the sudden silence. He reached out and grabbed her chin, forcing her to look at him. His breath reeked of cigarettes and cheap whiskey. Behind his mask, she could see eyes that had given up on redemption long ago. He started talking, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. About how the rich got richer, while honest people starved. About how women like her stepped on the backs of the working class. About how tonight, the tables would turn. Each word dripped with years of accumulated rage. Olivia wanted to argue, to explain that she'd earned every dollar through intelligence and hard work. But the gun against her ribs kept her silent. From his corner, Michael watched the scene unfold. The leader was grandstanding, getting drunk on his moment of power. Classic mistake. The more he talked, the more distracted he became. His partners were getting nervous, glancing toward the doors, checking their watches. They'd been inside too long. Someone had surely called the police by now. Sirens would come soon. Time was running out. That's when the leader made his crucial error. He dragged Olivia toward the center of the room, wanting everyone to see his prize. It brought him within 10 feet of Michael's table. For a split second, their eyes met, the CEO and the mechanic. In her gaze, Michael saw terror barely held in check. In his, she saw something she couldn't quite understand. A stillness that seemed almost supernatural, like looking into the eye of a hurricane. The leader noticed the exchange and turned toward Michael. He saw the flannel shirt, the calloused hands, the little girl hiding behind her father. His lips curled into a cruel smile. Here was another opportunity to make a point. The working man and his daughter, the billionaire and her empire. Perfect symbols for his twisted lesson. The leader shoved Olivia aside and stalked toward Michael's table. His weapons swinging carelessly, he started mocking the mechanic's cheap clothes, his obvious poverty. The pathetic attempt to give his daughter a fancy birthday dinner. The words were meant to humiliate, to break whatever dignity the man had left. Each insult landed like a physical blow on the watching crowd. This was cruelty for cruelty's sake. Michael didn't react, didn't flinch. His eyes remained fixed on a point just past the leader's shoulder, watching the other two robbers in his peripheral vision, calculating distances, angles, potential weapons, the steak knife on his table, the heavy water pitcher within reach, the chair that could become a shield. Behind him, Sophia whimpered softly. The leader heard it and laughed, moving closer, reaching toward the little girl. That's when everything changed. Michael's voice cut through the chaos, low and steady as bedrock. He told the leader to step back. Just 3 words, delivered without emotion. But something in the tone made everyone freeze. It wasn't a plea or a threat. It was a simple statement of fact, like announcing that gravity exists. The leader stopped mid-reach, confused by the lack of fear in the mechanic's voice. He'd terrorized dozens of people tonight, watched grown men cry and powerful women beg. But this nobody in flannel was talking to him like he was a misbehaving child. The insult to his authority couldn't stand. He swung the gun toward Michael's face, finger tensing on the trigger. The entire restaurant held its breath. Olivia found herself silently praying for the first time since childhood. But Michael still didn't move. He simply shifted his weight slightly, subtly positioning himself to shield Sophia completely. His eyes never left the leader's mask. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of someone who'd faced real monsters and survived. He told the leader he had two choices: walk away now, or things would get complicated. The words hung in the air like a prophecy. The leader's hand trembled slightly. Something primal in his brain screamed danger. This man wasn't afraid. In a room full of terror, his calm was unnatural, wrong. Like finding a lion where you expected a lamb. But pride won over instinct. The leader couldn't back down, not in front of his crew, not in front of all these witnesses. So he made the worst decision of his life. He reached for the little girl. Michael's hand shot out faster than thought, gripping the leader's wrist and twisting in a precise motion that sent the gun spinning across the marble floor. The crack of breaking bone echoed through the restaurant. Before anyone could process what had happened, Michael drove his knee into the leader's solar plexus, dropping him to his knees. The whole sequence took less than 2 seconds. A woman screamed. The other two robbers spun toward the commotion, weapons raised. Michael was already moving, pulling Sophia behind an overturned table. The heavy oak absorbed the first burst of gunfire, splinters exploding outward. The crowd erupted in fresh panic. But Michael remained calm, counting shots, tracking positions by sound. The second robber advanced, trying to flank the table. Michael grabbed the water pitcher, heavy crystal worth more than his monthly rent, and hurled it with sniper precision. It caught the robber in the temple, sending him stumbling. In that moment of imbalance, Michael closed the distance. A palm strike to the throat, an elbow to the ribs, a sweep that put the man on his back. The gun skittered away across polished marble. The third robber, the nervous young one, had Olivia again. His arm wrapped around her throat, gun pressed to her temple. His hand shook violently now, finger dancing on the trigger. One wrong move and her brilliant mind would be splattered across the designer wallpaper. Michael rose slowly from beside the unconscious second robber, hands visible but not raised. Blood trickled from a graze on his shoulder, where a bullet had kissed flesh. His flannel shirt was torn, revealing scarred muscle beneath. He looked like something from another era. A warrior displaced in time. The young robber screamed at him to stay back, tightening his grip on Olivia until she gasped for air. But Michael kept walking forward, each step measured and deliberate. He was talking now, his voice soft, almost hypnotic. Not to the robber, but to Olivia, telling her to breathe, to relax, to trust. Their eyes met across the chaos. She saw no doubt in his gaze, no uncertainty, just absolute conviction. For reasons she couldn't explain, she believed him. Her body went limp in the robber's arms, dead weight that threw off his balance. In that split second of adjustment, Michael struck. His hand swept up, directing the gun toward the ceiling as it fired. Plaster rained down. His other hand found the robber's carotid artery, applying precise pressure. The young man's eyes rolled back. He collapsed, Olivia falling with him. Michael caught her before she hit the ground, one arm supporting her weight, while his other hand secured the dropped weapon. For a heartbeat, they were frozen in an almost intimate embrace. The billionaire CEO and the single father mechanic. Her Chanel perfume mixed with his scent of motor oil and honest sweat. She could feel the steady beat of his heart against her chest. Impossibly calm after everything that had happened. Then Sophia's voice broke the spell, crying out for her daddy. Michael gently set Olivia on her feet and turned to his daughter, dropping to one knee to pull her into his arms. The little girl buried her face in his shoulder, sobbing. He stroked her hair, whispering that she was safe, that daddy would always protect her. The scene was so tender, so at odds with the violence of moments before, that several people began to cry. Sirens wailed outside, growing closer. The leader of the robbers groaned, trying to crawl toward his fallen weapon with his broken wrist. Michael simply stepped on the gun, grinding it into the marble with his worn work boot. He looked down at the man who'd threatened his daughter, and for the first time, emotion flickered across his face. Not anger, but disappointment. Like a teacher looking at a student who'd thrown away their potential, the police burst through the doors in a tsunami of noise and movement. Commands were shouted. Weapons were drawn. Chaos threatened to erupt again. But Michael simply raised his hands slowly, identifying himself and the robbers with military precision. Within minutes, the 3 criminals were in custody, the wounded receiving medical attention before being hauled away. A detective approached Michael, notebook ready, but before questions could be asked, Olivia Sterling stepped forward. Her designer dress was torn, her perfect hair disheveled, but her voice carried all its usual authority. She informed the detective that this man was a hero, that he'd saved everyone in the restaurant, that she would personally ensure he received recognition. The detective looked between them, noting the contrast, the impossibility of their connection, but he took down Michael's information, promising to be in touch after full statements were taken. As the police worked, Olivia watched Michael comfort his daughter. He'd refused medical attention for his wounded shoulder, focusing entirely on Sophia. The little girl had stopped crying but wouldn't let go of her father's hand. They looked so vulnerable, so ordinary. Yet she'd seen him move like death itself, precise and unstoppable. An EMT finally convinced Michael to let them examine his shoulder. As they cleaned the wound, Olivia approached hesitantly. Up close, she could see the scars that covered his arms and chest. Some from bullets, others from blades. Each one told a story of survival. She asked him directly who he really was. The question hung between them like a challenge. Michael looked up from where Sophia was clinging to his good arm. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, quietly, he told her the truth. 7 years with the Navy SEALs. 3 tours in Afghanistan. 2 in Iraq. Missions that would never be declassified. He'd left when Sarah got sick, choosing love over duty. After she died, it was just him and Sophia. The garage job barely covered rent, but it was honest work. He could fix things, make them run again. It was enough. Olivia felt something shift inside her chest. This man had walked away from elite military service to care for his dying wife, then raised his daughter alone on a mechanic's salary. He'd traded glory for love, power for purpose. Everything she'd believed about success, about strength, about what mattered in life, suddenly seemed as fragile as glass. She asked why he'd risked his life for strangers. He could have stayed hidden, protected only his daughter. No one would have blamed him. Michael's answer was simple. He'd learned in the service that everyone was someone's child, someone's parent, someone's love. When you could help, you helped. That's what separated humans from animals. Not money or power, but the choice to stand when others couldn't. A photographer appeared, one of the diners who'd hidden behind the bar. He'd captured the whole incident on his phone. The images would be on every news site by morning. The humble mechanic who'd saved Manhattan's elite, David versus Goliath in designer clothing. But Michael wanted none of it. He gathered Sophia, preparing to leave. Their birthday dinner was ruined, but at least they were alive. Olivia watched them head for the door. This extraordinary man, and his precious daughter, about to disappear back into anonymity. Something desperate rose in her throat. She called out, asking him to wait. When he turned, she saw patience in his eyes, but also exhaustion. He'd done his part. He just wanted to take his little girl home. She found herself asking if she could repay him somehow. A reward, a job, anything. Michael's response surprised her. He said Sophia needed to see that good things happen to good people. If Olivia wanted to help, she could show his daughter that kindness mattered more than money. Then they were gone, swallowed by the night, and the gathering crowd of reporters outside. Olivia stood in the ruins of the restaurant, surrounded by wealth and power, feeling poorer than she'd ever been. Her CFO approached, asking if she was all right, if she wanted to go to the hospital. She waved him away. Her body was fine. It was her soul that felt injured, cracked open like an egg. She'd built her empire on the belief that strength meant never needing anyone, that vulnerability was weakness, that the world was divided into winners and losers. But a man in a flannel shirt had just shattered that philosophy with his bare hands. She thought about Michael's scars, each one representing a moment when he'd chosen others over himself. She thought about how he'd held his daughter, protective and gentle in equal measure. She thought about the wedding ring he still wore, 5 years after his wife's death. Love that endured beyond loss. By the time she reached her penthouse apartment, Olivia had made a decision. Her entire life had been about taking market share, taking profits, taking control. Maybe it was time to learn about giving. She called her assistant, despite the late hour. Tomorrow, she wanted a complete background check on Michael Harris, not to exploit or expose, but to understand. What did a hero need when the cameras turned away? The next morning brought a media storm. Michael's face was on every screen, his story on every tongue. The mechanic who'd taken down 3 armed robbers barehanded. The single father who'd saved Manhattan's elite. But Michael himself was nowhere to be found. He'd taken Sophia to school, then disappeared into the city's anonymous millions. Olivia watched the coverage from her office, noting how the media focused on the violence, the drama, the spectacular takedown. They missed the real story. A father's love, a man's choice to stand when he could have hidden, the profound courage of everyday people facing extraordinary moments. She pulled up the background report her assistant had compiled. Michael Harris, originally from Ohio, enlisted at 18, decorated multiple times for valor. Married Sarah Conway, a pediatric nurse, in a simple ceremony at Camp Pendleton. When Sarah was diagnosed with terminal cancer, he'd given up everything to be with her. Now he lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in Queens, working 60 hours a week to keep Sophia in a good school. No savings, no safety net, just determination and love. A week passed. The story faded from headlines, replaced by new scandals and fresher tragedies. But Olivia couldn't forget. She found herself thinking about Michael at odd moments. During board meetings, while reviewing quarterly projections, in the quiet hours before dawn when success felt like an empty room. Finally, she sent a message through the detective, an invitation, not a summons. She wanted to thank him properly, in front of her entire company, to show her employees what real courage looked like. Michael's response was polite but clear. He didn't need thanks or recognition. He'd done what anyone should do. But Sophia had seen the invitation, read it with the careful attention of a 7-year-old learning about the world. She asked her daddy why he didn't want to go. Weren't they friends with the pretty lady now? Michael couldn't explain to his daughter that their worlds were too different, that people like them didn't mix with people like Olivia Sterling. So when Sophia asked if they could go, just to see, he agreed. For her, always for her. The Sterling Industries headquarters took up 40 floors of prime Manhattan real estate. When Michael and Sophia arrived, wearing their best clothes that still looked shabby in the marble lobby, security didn't want to let them in. It took Olivia herself coming down to clear the confusion. She led them to the executive floor, where hundreds of employees had gathered. Michael was uncomfortable with the attention, but Sophia's eyes were wide with wonder. She held her father's hand tightly, whispering that it looked like a palace. Olivia stood before her empire and told them about courage. Not the courage to make deals or take risks with money, but the courage to act, when action could cost everything. She introduced Michael not as a hero, but as a reminder that strength wasn't about what you could take, but what you were willing to give. That true power came from protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. The applause was thunderous. Michael endured it with military stoicism, but Sophia beamed, proud of her daddy. After the presentation, Olivia asked them to her office. She had something to show them. The view from the top floor stretched across Manhattan, a kingdom of glass and steel. But what caught Sophia's attention was the small table, set with hot chocolate and cookies. Real cookies, not the fancy ones from expensive bakeries, but chocolate chip cookies like her mommy used to make. As Sophia explored the office, marveling at everything, Olivia and Michael talked. She told him about the scholarship fund she was creating in Sophia's name, full rides to any school for children of single parents. She told him about the job offer Not charity, but genuine need. Her company needed someone who could fix problems, who could see through complexity to simple solutions. Someone who understood that the most valuable things couldn't be bought. Michael listened without interrupting. When she finished, he asked a simple question. Why? Why did it matter to her what happened to him and Sophia? Olivia's answer surprised them both with its honesty, because he'd shown her something she'd lost. The understanding that money was just paper, that power was an illusion, that the only thing that truly mattered was how we treated each other when the masks came off and the guns were drawn. She'd spent 34 years building walls. Maybe it was time to build bridges instead. Michael was quiet for a long moment, watching his daughter trace her fingers along the window, drawing invisible pictures on the glass. Then he told Olivia something that would stay with her forever. He said that during his time in service, he'd learned that there were two types of people: those who ran toward danger to help others, and those who ran away to save themselves. The choice defined not just moments, but entire lives. She'd proven which type she was when she offered to help without expecting anything in return. As they prepared to leave, Sophia ran to Olivia and hugged her around the waist, thanking her for the cookies and the scholarship. The embrace was unexpected, genuine. The simple gratitude of a child who'd learned that kindness could come from unexpected places. Olivia found herself kneeling, returning the hug, feeling something crack open inside her chest, a warmth she'd walled off since childhood. When she decided that success mattered more than connection. Over Sophia's shoulder, she met Michael's eyes. He was smiling. The first real smile she'd seen from him. It transformed his weathered face, revealing the man beneath the warrior. In that moment, she understood that strength and gentleness weren't opposites. They were partners, each making the other possible. The months that followed brought changes neither could have predicted. Michael took the job, not as charity, but as a challenge. He brought the same precision to corporate security that he'd brought to special operations. Olivia found herself seeking his input not just on safety, but on decisions that affected employees' lives. He had a way of cutting through complexity to find human truth. Sophia bloomed in her new school, the one the scholarship made possible. She still wore simple clothes, still brought lunch in a used container, but she walked taller, smiled brighter. She'd learned that her daddy was a hero, not because of what he'd done in a restaurant, but because of what he did every day. Choosing love over easy, choosing right over profitable, choosing to stand when he could sit. Olivia began joining them for Saturday lunches. Nothing fancy, just pizza or burgers at places where Sophia could be a kid. She learned to appreciate the beauty of simplicity, the richness of moments that couldn't be bought. Michael taught her that happiness wasn't something you achieved, but something you chose every morning, despite the darkness that might surround you. One evening, almost 6 months after the robbery, Olivia found herself at Michael's apartment for Sophia's 8th birthday party. The space was small but immaculate, filled with photographs of Sarah, of family, of moments that mattered. She'd brought an expensive gift, then felt foolish when she saw that Michael had made Sophia a jewelry box by hand, each piece carefully carved and sanded. The little girl treasured it like gold, because it carried her father's love in every groove. As they watched Sophia play with friends from school, Michael told Olivia about Sarah, how she'd made him promise to keep living, keep loving, keep showing Sophia that the world could be beautiful despite its sharp edges. He'd kept that promise even when grief made breathing feel like drowning. He'd kept it because love wasn't just a feeling but a choice, renewed each day like a soldier's oath. Olivia understood then what she'd been seeking without knowing it. Not success or power, or the endless acquisition of more, but connection, purpose, beyond profit. The understanding that we're all walking each other home through a dark and often violent world, and the greatest courage is to offer light when you're barely managing your own shadows. As she left that night, Sophia asleep, and Michael walking her to her car, Olivia turned back to look at the modest apartment building. In the window, she could see the jewelry box on Sophia's dresser, catching the light from the street lamp. Such a simple thing, but crafted with such love that it seemed to glow. Michael stood beside her, following her gaze. He said that Sarah used to tell him that we don't get to choose how long we have, just how brightly we burn. The robbery, the violence, the fear. They were just shadows. What mattered was the light people chose to cast despite them. Olivia thought about her empire, her billions, her influence. For the first time, she saw them not as achievements but as tools. Tools she could use to cast more light, to help more single fathers and daughters reaching for dreams beyond their circumstances. The robbery had been a moment of darkness that revealed unexpected stars. Looking back, she couldn't regret it, because it had taught her the most valuable lesson of her life. True power wasn't about what you could take, or control, or dominate. It was about what you could give, who you could lift, what light you could offer to others, navigating their own shadows. As her car pulled away, she saw Michael in the rearview mirror, standing guard until she was safely gone. Still protecting, still serving, still choosing love over easy. She'd once thought him ordinary, a nobody in flannel who didn't belong in her world. Now she understood that he was extraordinary precisely because he chose to be ordinary, to live simply, to value love over gold. The city lights blurred past her window as tears she hadn't expected rolled down her cheeks, not tears of sadness but of gratitude. For Michael, who'd shown her that heroes wore flannel and drove used trucks. For Sophia, who'd taught her that joy didn't require wealth. For Sarah, whose memory lived on in every choice her husband made to keep being good in a world that rewarded otherwise. And for that moment in a restaurant when violence had revealed virtue, when chaos had uncovered character. When a single father's courage had changed not just an evening but entire lives. The robbery had ended. The fear had faded. The headlines had moved on. But the light Michael Harris had shown that night continued to burn, spreading from person to person, choice to choice, one act of courage creating ripples of kindness that would travel farther than any of them could imagine. In the end, Olivia Sterling learned that we're all just people trying to protect what we love, trying to be brave when we're terrified, trying to choose light when darkness feels easier. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, we meet someone who shows us that we're capable of more than we ever imagined. Someone who teaches us that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the moments we stand up, step forward, and choose to be the light someone else needs to find their way home.